First, thank you so very much, NCORE, for having me. And just to be clear, in the spirit of tradition, before we begin in the Keeping It Real journey that we deem the next 45 minutes or so, I'd like to express my sincerest gratitude to the Chitimacha and the Oma tribal nations. We acknowledge the land on which we sit and occupy today as the traditional home of the Chiti, Macha, and Oma tribal nations. Without them, we will not have access to this gathering and to this dialogue. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. The Chiti Macha are a federally recognized tribe with a reservation in Charenton, La, recognized in 1916. The Oma are a state-recognized tribe, recognized in 1972. Oma means red, as in Oklahoma, red people. With that said, Usa kasi a usa weyu guatiao, good day, friends, relatives, peoples. I'm so happy to be here. Deary, Michael, Benitez, I'm so looking forward to today. I've dreamt about this for so long, I don't even know where to begin. Before we get started, and I must, this is really a special moment. Addressing this crowd for me and chilling here with y'all, it's like journeying with family. It's like chilling at my dining room table. Literally back and forth arguments, selecting which politic to choose, which one not to choose. This is like returning home. Second, and I must, today is my daughter's birthday. And I want to acknowledge my queen of queens, Ariana, who's in the front, who told me not to, but I must. How can I not? Because I am, because literally she is. I want to also just acknowledge, particularly when I think about this concept, diversity, this work, the Trumpian age, how difficult the work has been getting just some peoples, because I think that we've sometimes gotten so caught up in being reactionary to what's going out there today and the way that it trickles down to our local communities that we forget how to mentor, peer mentor each other. So I want to give some very particular shout outs, because these mentors, elders, have exemplified for me how I choose to move forward. So I'm going to start with Shakti Butler, Chris Cullinan, Victor Lewis, Tom Hill, Ricardo Torres, Hazel Simone, Dexter Gordon, if you're out there, bro. This invitation to serve as the afternoon's keynote speaker is by far the most special invitation for me out of the many journeys that I've been invited to undertake. I grew up in NCORE, cultivated many relationships, conversations with, and cultivated ruptures to diversity, equity, and inclusion without giving up my soul, always remaining fully, authentically. I am that cat that will have the president saying, I'm chilling productively, before I say, I'm doing well. I want to place a particular emphasis on authenticity. You see, it's no joke to stay authentic in the academy. In this neo-colonial and colonial entities that weren't created with people of color in mind. And yet we exist and coexist, and we negotiate and we navigate these waters, this terrain, all the time. So someone like me, in this case, people of color who are often minoritized, are reminded then quite a bit every day about the many ways that we don't belong. And so as I take on this topic, I want to give a couple more shout outs, because I must, to my homies from the very get-go that did together with me, even when we didn't know each other, and we just came together, made it happen because we dreamt, and we were resilient. And we didn't let the garbage that was out there interfere. Amir, Kale, Omeka, Aisha, and Zenga, among others. I freaking love ya. Now to the meat. I am reminded each and every day, as the late Manny Marable has done, and as the current and contemporary Black feminist scholar, Dr. Nana Osei Kofi, continues to remind us today to struggle where we are. Hence, if we are to struggle intentionally, actively, collectively, how nice then to do it in the spirit of critical fun, revolutionary love, and to struggle with folk who share in the radical kinship that we understand very well, not only in the challenge behind struggle, but the beauty that struggle has to offer in the ongoing and shifting current moment and moments. So now what? Beyond recruitment, what does cultivation look like? How do we account for the ways in which the national landscape trickles down to our localities, the colleges, the universities? Now more than ever, the urgency for inclusivity has never been clearer, following so many of the events that I'm not going to repeat here that we see happening literally at least 10 times a day, prior to the Trumpian age of whiteness, and absolutely amplified once Trump became this, assumed his role. I struggle to call him my president. That's just not going to happen. When I think about what that looks like, the cultivation, we got to stop talking literally about recruitment, and start getting into conversations, especially in higher ed, of diversity, cultivation, and sustainability. Everything that comes with that. We must think about the way that we invite members onto our communities highly intentionally. Every year we have a number of staff and faculty, and every year we have new students coming into our campus. Some of them come from very small places, small-time Idaho, 200 people with some mountains, and they show up to Puget Sound and they say something like, damn, this place is really great and diverse. Then you have cats who come from the Bay or New York, about pre-gentrification New York, and thank you, and say something like, wow, this place is really white. That's where I stand. This place is really white. And then we must understand also our roles as educators, first and foremost, in the spaces, right? We cannot expect folks, students, all faculty and staff, well, hey, hold on, let me hold back. I do expect faculty and staff to show up with a very particular no. Students is a different story, but faculty and staff should know better. Just real talk. I'm reminded about the first time I was looking for sustainability and cultivation. I'm going to share it now. Justin, I love you, wherever you're at, man. Thank you so much. Cultivation. Victor, where you at, bro? I'm going to call you out a little bit, call you in. Thanks, Loretta, for those words. One time when I was at Penn State, him and Peggy went over to do some workshop, and not long before that, I had finished watching The Color of Fear and Soch 119. If a lot of y'all might have had that experience. And so I was amped, I was young, I was like, Victor Lewis is coming? What? I gotta get up. I'm gonna have to figure out to get into that group. So I got into the group. We had some great conversations around Black mentorship and brown mentorship and what that looks like for males, and how do we establish peer-to-peer mentoring relationships. And a break came, and Vic grabbed that big apparatus he used to kind of walk, that is now a phone, back in 1996 with a big pen, and had big hands, he had to just. So he's walking out the room, and so I said, this is my move right here. And so as he walked out, I very carefully crafted what 3.5 feet looked like. I said, I'm going to stay 3.5 feet behind him. I'm going to make sure he doesn't notice that, I'm behind him. At least that's what I thought. So he walks out, I wait, I count the steps, and I say, all right, it's my turn. So I start walking out, just like this. I'm taking the steps that he's taking, just like this. Then he stops, picks out that big thing he had in his hand, takes out his pen, look back forward, probably saying, what's wrong with this dude? What's he doing following me around? And then you know what I did, what anybody else would do? I stopped. And I looked at the wall. And I said, he ain't gonna know. Now I checked back in. He started walking outside. I went right behind him. He pulled up, taking his break. I pulled up right behind him, right alongside him. I just chilled there, pulled out my cig at the time. That's what I was gonna go out to do. And I was like, damn, how do I break the ice? Like, is he gonna respond to me? Is he gonna reject me? Is he gonna be like, this dude is wild, dude, stop stalking me? I mean, I don't know. And I said, hey, yo, Vic. I said, bro, you know, like I really dig your work. It's been really impactful, and I'm looking for a mentor. And then I said, and I gotta tell you, you remind me of an older me. And you know, I didn't even know how foolish that sounded until after I said it. But Vic looked down on me, just looked at me, gave me a little stare for about 8 seconds or so. Then he got his smile on. He gave me this big smile. He pulled out his card, his pen, put down his celly on the card, and gave it to me, and said, little man, you can call me anytime. Vic, bro, I freaking love you, bro. I tell that story because I see the way that neoliberalism has infected intellectualism and relationships today. I tell that story because I ask all of you and remind you that part of the sustainability and the cultivation of communities is not to become inaccessible to the people and the students that need us the most. I see it over and over, the presumptuous stances that some of our most brilliant, and I must go there, the way they engage, the way that they set themselves apart and not give a piece of themselves to the students that seek to learn from their brilliance, and that is so freaking ashamed. I pride myself on accessibility. I pride myself on being available, not all the time. I set parameters, no doubt, but I pride myself on that very practice that Victor exemplified. That didn't mean he was gonna pick up the phone every time I called. That didn't mean that he was gonna be right there to answer all the time, or even much of the mentors that I have mentioned earlier. It just means they made themselves accessible because they understood what it means to pass down knowledge and to be there as we cultivate the generations of tomorrow. In addressing the now what, I'd like to start with what Professor Dexter Gordon has referred to as exhaustive reconceptualization. Right? A term he uses to think about the ways in which every day we have to strategically rethink how we show up in order to do the good work that is equity, diversity, and inclusion in the academy. So when I think about the state of diversity, there's so many issues, so many things wrong with the way that we do the work in higher education. And we really have to show up contextually and be present in very different sort of ways. I appreciate him because people tell me, bro, you're at Puget Sound. That's the Northwest. I say, yeah, that's the Northwest. They'll say, it's really white over there. I say, yeah. And then they'll say, it's like Northwest nice? I say, yeah, it's like Northwest nice. But folks over there are actually kind of nice. Now, I'm telling you, bro, I remember when I first got there, I was going to walk across the street, and it wasn't even my right of turn. And there was a car coming, and the car was slowing down. And I was just there, hoodie, just chilling, waiting to walk. And I saw the car slow down. Now, for people of color who experience trauma every day, the first thing that I came to my head was, oh, hell no. I'm a dean now. Man, I can't be fighting. Ending up on the news. Tacoma Tribune, new dean of equity and inclusion. But the closer the car got, I saw his hands, and the hands were doing this. So I thought, damn, here's some fool, probably gonna throw his middle finger, slur something out the window. But he caught me off guard. The closer he got, what I saw was him doing this. And then eventually I saw that he was getting annoyed because I wasn't crossing the street. Nice people. Now, I gotta say that was a different experience. I've learned through different conversations the difference between the Midwest and the Northwest. So the Northwest is passive-aggressive indeed, which I appreciate with equity and inclusion work, because what that means is that after I say something they don't like or they don't want to deal with me, what they do is they step out the way. They literally get the F out the way, and they won't mess with me no more, which means I could do my work. But the Midwest, they're aggressive, passive-aggressive. When you start talking about race, they want to let you know that they're passive-aggressive. They signal that and indicate that to you. They'll brush your shoulder like, but I'm not messing with you. It's like a bite. So that's the Midwest, that they're aggressive, passive-aggressive. But that niceness, right, is part of what I want to address today, and I want to signal and mark. No different than at a time that Cedric Robinson didn't look at Marxism and say, Marxism is Marxism. He said, no, there is such a thing as black Marxism. It looks a certain way. The same way that women of color, and before I finish that, women of color, thank you. Thank you for being the continuity that allows justice to exist. Women of color looked back at the 70s and said, that's not just feminism, that's white feminism. So they had to then create their own spaces of feminism, right? And so we're at a time in an age of liberalism where liberalism can't just exist as liberalism. It is white liberalism. For white people. Enabling and reproducing whiteness in the most toxic of ways. Because even as many folks mean well, and this is no this is me being just the real cat that I am, but I love all because man, at the end I'm about humanity. This is about calling in white liberalism and inviting a conversation about the ways white liberalism is enabling the badness and the toxic work to go on at our institutions. And it's nasty because a lot of folks don't have the privilege to just chill back and be like, oh, I could only work this, or I could only handle that, or, you know, at least I'm doing my part. No, you must struggle alongside and even in front of your king and other people of color. Like, put yourself in the way, because at the end, this nation loves to protect some whiteness. You're going to be all right. People of color, on the other hand, we see them come into institutions and go quicker than students, lasting no more than 2-3 years before they can't hack it at that institution anymore, which then brings me back to Professor Dexter Gordon and what we have going on there and have been a part of, the Race and Pedagogy Institute. We have that conference on September 27th through September 29th. About 3,000 people come to the University of Puget Sound. We do it every 4 years in partnership with the community. He's one of the co-founders, but we go in. Every 4 years, I invite you to that. Now, that's to say that these issues are going to exist everywhere. Every institution is going to have them. And you don't have to be white to practice white supremacy. We see that so evidently. We see that across people of color communities, minoritized communities, racially, ethnically minoritized communities. We see it all the time in intersecting ways. We see it all the time. You don't have to be white. I talked to somebody the other day, and I'm not gonna, get too deep into it, but, I'm always surprised when folks still come at me and say some idiotic shit like, look, I don't care if you're green or pink or purple. In which then I respond and I say, damn, I do. Like, if you ever see somebody green or blue or purple, you let me know. I want a picture with that person. And now if the issue is with your eyesight, I know some great optometrists, and I pull out mine, and I say, here, they could get you some glasses. Right? But I say that because it's important that we find that community, and that community, Puget Sound, phenomenal place. We've done great work. A shout out to all the Washingtonians, my peoples who are here with me, and who I've done some great work with over the last 5 years with the Northwest 5 Consortium for supporting faculty of color. It's been amazing. When we find and cultivate those spaces, you can truly exist in places like Puget Sound in ways where you can still do the good work from wherever you're at. And I have found that at Puget Sound in a way that I haven't found it anywhere else because of that community that is the Race and Pedagogy Institute at Puget Sound. Because everything else is going to happen irrespective. Just the other day, to get into it, I was chilling outside, doing some work on my celly or on lunch break, some really hard work called Candy Crush. And some dude walked up to me, had a vest, and he stopped me. He said, "Thank you, fantastic." I got scared because I thought, like, Chump says that all the time, but okay, it's not Chump. It's this cat. And he said, "Good work." Now, I look puzzled. I was like, why is homie coming at me, telling me about good work, fantastic? Then he goes on to say, I'm going to read this. As I know, I put it up on Facebook. I want to read it. "Not knowing what he was referring to, I must have appeared puzzled enough in my facial expression and response, or lack thereof, that he elaborated on his congratulatory note. He went on to say, 'The grounds, they look great. You guys do such an amazing job with the grounds. This grounds, the landscaping is really amazing. I just wanted to say thank you. Incredible job, just incredible.' I replied, though not angrily, one, because we're used to this shit, literally. But as I normally do with most ignorant mofos, I'm not a groundskeeper, I replied. And the campus is indeed pretty. I am the Dean of Equity and Inclusion and the CDO and the Title IX, you know, and the cat that actually could be writing a report on your ass right now, but, you know. But personally, I like that this place looks pretty, but I prefer that some of the resources that go into making this place look pretty go to the students and the faculty of color. I'm surprised how much money we never have. Institutions, because I've done work at plenty for the good work, but come homecoming, they spend thousands on balloons. It makes no sense to me. I'll refrain from sharing what I really kind of wanted to say, but as I looked around, because he looked at me, stared at me, walked away, didn't say sorry, he was like, oh, okay, thank you. And I was like, damn, whenever I mess up, at least I say just my bad. Right? But I thought about how many people experience that all the time, and then what are we doing, and how do we invite people onto our campus communities? That's the question that I ask cabinet trustees in any institution. When you tell somebody that your institution embraces inclusion and equity, that it embraces this incredible work that is diversity. And diversity in a very particular way, because I remind institutions, and this is what we have to be saying out there in response. We get diversity, but we don't get the work that is diversity. We get diversity, but we don't get the work that is diversity. Diversity in itself should be a division, likely renamed the Office of Decolonizing Affairs, with a staff of 10 and a bunch of resources. Because turning around 525 years is no small feat. Moral of the story, though, in that sense, I want to say is, higher ed in the US was not made again for us. However, we have to understand that us as, you know, minoritized people in the different identities and even intersecting identities, that we need to understand that it is still ours to take, reclaim, transform into what it should look like. Equity and inclusion is not meant to be easy work. It is a calling for the peace warriors of the world willing to coexist with the ever-present tensions of inhumanity. We must not let the racist microaggressions committed by ignorant people who don't even know how racism works and how they themselves enable racism and demonstrate the many ways, or try to demonstrate the many ways, we don't belong. But we know you took that shit from us, so we just dare to take it back to reclaim. I'm saying. So now let me be clear, right, behind this. And I'm telling you, right, the thing about dominant identities is that they really don't know how often people of color in the academy and society at large have to brush this ish away and just move forward. But at the end, we really do belong. We not only belong, we are resilient. Our ancestors did a phenomenal job cultivating and carving the space for us to walk today and keep it moving forward, and we can't take that for granted. So I also want to call in another topic into the mix, white liberalism. The other one is exceptionalism and mediocrity. Look, I love my peoples, I love humanity. Sometimes I wanna cry because that's how much I care. But this is not the time to back down. This is not the time for us to get along so cautiously that we forget our calling. If anything, for those of us who do this work, I'm challenging you and I'm calling upon you to take this time to put into work what you've trained for all these freaking years. To push, to resist. That's what we were called to do. Not to chill there and exist and let something happen and go by and think it's just gonna pass. We have to be an active part of the process. Why do we wait until our loved ones die, get shot, get beaten down? Something happens to them for us to step up to the plate and finally care. Why? That is my question. That's my deep question. Why do we wait? Why don't we take on this journey from the very, very beginning and not wait until something happens to someone we love and look at what's happening out there and do the work in the spirit of collective community and how we exist and must fight in solidarity together to make things happen? Why? So I want to say then, particularly, the ways in which we think about diversity and the state of diversity, right? Because, it's wild. I've also been dealing with like calls like, hey, dude had a Trump hat on, kick him out. And I touched on this a little bit earlier in the podcast, right? But what I want to say about that is we must have thick skin and grit, and not just ask our students to have thick skin and grit. That's what we spend our time doing. Our students, they need thick skin, they need grit. We got to cultivate them like that. You know what? No, faculty and staff, we need thick skin, we need grit. The students are good. They're going to do what they do. And I always talk with students too all the time, and I give them ideas because, look, that's what I do, that's who I was. I remember when I was at Penn State, the work that happened there, some of the movements that took place there, when Terrell Jones was there, how I was involved with that, what we had to do. So for me to know, at least share, I will never, let's say, encourage, because I might, get in trouble, but just share possibilities, creative and innovative ways of showing up. And so I'm going to put this out there just as a question. Now, administrators in particular, because I'm one, don't look at me and be like, dude, shh. What would you do if 300 students went to the registrar's building and all decided to transfer out in the same day? Oh, you're like, damn, that should have hit. I'm just saying, I want to remind the students that they have that power. I want to remind the students that that's the type of chaos, that's the type of struggle, that's the type of power that they have in our campus communities, and we must be able to respond and not continue to allow students to just somehow try to figure it out. Now, for the staff doing the real crazy work, I want to read to you something because I want to appreciate you real quick. And this was on a letter, a powerful letter from Frederick Douglass that he wrote to Harriet Tubman in 1868. He said, I am glad to know that the story of your eventful life has been written by a kind lady, and that the same is soon to be published. You ask for what you do not need when you call upon me for a word of commendation. I need such words from you far more than you can need them from me, especially where your superior labors and devotion to the cause of the lately enslaved of our land are known as I know them. The difference between us is very marked. Most that I have done and suffered in the service of our cause has been in public, and I have received much encouragement at every step of the way. You, on the other hand, have labored in a private way. I have wrought in the day, you in the night. I have had the applause of the crowd and the satisfaction that comes of being approved by the multitude, while the most that you have done has been witnessed by a few trembling, scarred, and footsore bondmen and women whom you have led out of the house of bondage, and whose heartfelt God bless you has been your only reward. The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witness of your devotion to freedom and your heroism. Excepting John Brown of sacred memory, I know of no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than you have. Much that you have done will seem improbable to those who do not know you as I know you. It is to me a great pleasure and a great privilege to bear testimony for your character and your works, and to say to those to whom you may come that I regard you in every way truthful, and trustworthy. That is to say, for the faculty and staff on the ground who are always in the trenches, making sure that our students don't leave and succeed, I appreciate y'all so freaking much. Thank you for that. You don't get enough love. You don't get enough props. I see it every day. Making sure that they get through, that they get by. That's real talk. Now, I could be like Trump, chump, and say something like, faculty, staff, and students of color will be very proud. Very, very proud to live in today's society. This is the best time to live. Yes, I said it, it is. Wonderful, wonderful time to be a person of color. It is the most equal time in history, even for blacks and Hispanics. I know. You should be very proud to be alive today. I'm proud to be alive today. I have done a fantastic, just fantastic, terrific job, really fantastic job with diversity in higher education. Betsy DeVos, great job, fantastic. Best education ever. You see, it's Starbucks. Fantastic job addressing implicit bias. Fantastic, great, superb job. Kim Kardashian. Your expertise in the prison industrial complex. Fantastic job. Fantastic job. For all the work you've done for all those years. Just fantastic. And in the words of Audre Lorde, if you can't understand how... So I want to throw this out there, right? The part that is interesting about that, when I think about Audre and her work, she said, if you can understand how white supremacy, anti-blackness, and settled colonialism and cultural imperialism has idealized white beauty standards to the point where notions of racial preferences is a symptom of systemic of oppression, then you should be able to do the same thing for size, ability, and gender performance. And I want to say this in this spirit, people. We must learn to be and come to be at peace with the tension of our humane inhumanity. Every day we walk around wearing clothes because we wear clothes. Women and small children across the world are dying and exploited because we wear freaking clothes. People in the Congo and very particular parts of the world are dying, and their villages are being pillaged by white imperialists and then those that are contracted on their bloody hands for us to have wireless technology. So we are enablers of a humane inhumanity that is so nasty. And even as good as we are, we're also incredibly terrible. And I don't say that with a go out there, feel bad, feel guilty. No, I hope not. Hell no. I'm calling you in. I say that with the spirit that if we exist with those tensions in other ways, then we must also exist with those tensions in our positionalities, in our institutions, and our abilities to self-implicate. We must, because our children and the generations depend on it. I mean, look, props to all the native peoples in here, Native Americans, American Indians, who for 350 plus, 525 years, have had to stood aside everyone else and say, when the are you gonna get out of my land? And that is hard to hear, but it's also the reality that we must cope with literally each and every day as we coexist and we live and we do this work. So I'm going to leave you with some things, some, not perhaps tools, but some things I have found in my time doing diversity and addressing diversity and inclusion work. When that white person comes at you and says, I'm oppressed, I feel like I am the martyr of my institution. My voice is shut down all the time. it's important as educators that we embrace not the ignorance, but allow the respectful erroring to give it some language to take place. And so that we can differentiate for them what structural marginalization looks like, and then what local devaluation and the forms that local devaluation can take place. Because that is also very real in institutions where there are actually conservative voices that do freaking care, not in the hardcore hatred that we're thinking about, but are really trying. And if we don't help them, it's like saying this. When we create cultural centers, this is one of my biggest issues with multiculturalism work. I love it, it's who I am, what I do, but one of my biggest issues is that we created it in resistance to white supremacy and hegemony, and then we allowed white supremacy and hegemony to approve it for us. And so those spaces, in order to be really, really effective, it's about supporting minoritized students and faculty and staff, but they're also about educating and providing and historicizing. Professor Grace Livingston, in spirit, to historicize is so important that we understand those spaces of resistance and the value that those spaces offer to our white students. Because where the hell are we going to send our white students? To the freaking Greek houses? To deconstruct with their freaking peers? Or are we going to carve that room out for them in the spaces of resistance that exist on our campus for them to have those conversations in the spirit of revolutionary love? Just saying. I think about my children. I got to tell you, Iowa was hard. I think about the time that my son was introduced to the word Negro. It's a painful moment. And I think about how much that impacted his confidence and his identity and how he questioned himself. And it started like this, and here's the story. Went to the school, he has some friends, he's standing in line. He is with some peers. They're about 7, 8 years old, literally 7, 8 years old. And then he turns around to his friend and says, "No, you go back to the line, chocolate." And then a white young boy hears that and runs across to the teacher and says, Teacher, Mike called said student Negro." But the white teacher, no different than the way that the white collars of today, yeah, I see somebody black. I need you to respond. What are they doing? I don't know, but it's creepy. They're threatening. They're doing something with their hands. And the way that that's taking place in the nation today, and why it's so important for us to have conversations with security, again, in particular, about how that happens, and about reestablishing a protocol. It's the same way that the white teacher looked at my son and just said, "Guilty." This young white boy who is 7 years old is right. At no point did the white teacher look at this young white boy and say, like educators who are taught, say, "Tell me more. What happened? Can you tell me exactly what was said?" No, just believe them. Before she went to my son and went to this young black girl, and this young black girl for the first time learned she was the N-word by way of a white teacher who didn't even know the meaning behind N in the derogatory form and N in the terms of Negroes. It was used in the historic sense in a self-proclaimed way. And then for my son, who then started to question, is black bad? That's how our school systems function and they work. That's why they're so important. Those are the students that eventually make it to our college campuses. At the end of the road, when me and my partner, Queen, investigated, what we found out is that they were playing a game. 7, 8-year-olds. The young black girl, she was like, "My skin is beautiful like chocolate, call me chocolate." My son was like, "Well, I'm like a caramel, call me pecan, call me caramel." And the young other white boy, not the one that went to Tattletale, the other white boy that was part of that crew, a trio too, he said, "Well, I mean, I'm pretty white, so I'll just be Wonder Bread." They were being 7, 8-year-olds, so when he said go back to the line chocolate, they were talking code talk. But the school took it to a whole different level. Yeah, me and my wife had to do something with her eventually being terminated from that school district. And of course, only to be replaced by the deputy superintendent who was worse than she was. And it goes on the work. So I've created, as I begin to wrap this up, I've created who's familiar here with the diagnostic manual 4, right? That psychiatrists use, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I think I'm going to propose a disorder called Figueres Syndrome. And the main symptoms of Figueres Syndrome are going to be, first and foremost, this place of supremacist ideology. You're just feeling, superior to everyone else for no reason. Nostalgia for everybody who likes to think about those wonderful times when things were great and equal, who have colorblind tendencies, who are just incredibly scared and fear non-whiteness in whatever way it shows, who are irrational. And I'm pretty sure you've had your cases. I've had many conversations and talking to people where all I'm hearing is, but no, 9 + 5 is 20, no. And an ability to implicate self and situate themselves, and symptoms that could be confused for affluenza. If you recall back in Texas, I got to bring that up. So let me get this straight. Nothing's going to happen to this kid because he was too spoiled and his parents didn't know better. Damn white supremacy. Because if I flip the stages and I just got to think every day if Barack did even 1% of the shit Trump is getting away with, he wouldn't even be impeached. Man, they would lock him up for life. The conviction behind the work. And I leave it in this particular spaces. When I do my work, and what I'm asking all of you is to think about the suspension of disbelief. I don't know how many theater buffs are out there. I like theater, right? I'm a theater cat in that sense. But they use this term suspension of disbelief. Now imagine if all of you watched a movie and you couldn't suspend your disbelief. Can you truly enjoy film? You would be there and you'd be angry all the time. You grow old right in front of your very face. You'd be like, oh, hell no. This transformer who weighs like 2 tons flew into outer space, went into galaxy, went to Mars, then to the moon, came back, fell off a bridge, and still, that's just not, I just don't believe it. So when you suspend your disbelief and when you put that forward as a strategy, you're also asking people of dominant identities to literally suspend their disbelief of lack of possibilities and think about the possibilities of inhumanity in order to step into the work. It's an invitation to how they can show up and just believe in the space and actually believe the lived realities and narratives of people of non-dominant identities and how they exist in dominant spaces. We must do the work not based on dominant discomfort, but on the need for equity and inclusion all the time without compromise. It's so important. Lastly, I'm going to give you a quote, and I'm going to share one final story to close it out. One of my favorite quotes is by Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of Freedom. He said, the demand that is that right thinking belongs intimately to right doing. In this sense, to teach right thinking is not something that is simply spoken of or an experience that is merely described, but something that is done and lived while it is being spoken of, as if the doing and the living of it constituted a kind of irrefutable witness of its truth. That means that you can't just talk, you also got to walk. You can't just walk, you also got to talk. You got to do the work together. That said, let me tell you what that looks like. because, me and my partner, Queen, our kids, they bring a lot of issues for us, good issues, because we raise them to be outspoken. We raise them to be peace warriors. We raise them to believe that the world belongs to them. We raise them to believe that when they go in those schools, they have every right when a teacher says some dumbass shit to school them. Yes. So my son came from school again one day. This happened in Iowa. He said, Mom, Dad, I'm going to boycott the cafeteria. Now, his mom and I, we looked at him like, what's going on? And, she was like, what's up, papito? When we talk, the papito, What's going on, Papa? Tell me, what happened? And I'm there just like happy, and she's happy too, because like, my son is about to boycott the cafeteria. So he said, you see, look, Mom, Dad. So I was like there chilling with my friends. And it's interesting, my son, I always have to remind him, like, bro, like, I know I'm from the hood. You're not. You grew up in college communities your whole life, bro. And he says, we're just there chilling, having pizza. And then what happened? Well, when I looked at my pizza and I went to eat it, I noticed that it had hair on it. So I'm like, okay, it's nasty shit, all right. And then so I went to take it back to the lunch lady, and she wouldn't give me another one. Which to me was kind of foul. It's like a kid going to take you a pizza with some hair on it, you replace that slice, you give him a new one. But he didn't get the new one, so he came home upset. The injustice. Pizza justice. And he went on, he's like, so what I'm gonna do is, Mom, he went right to her. Created more work for her. He's like, I'm gonna need you to fix me my lunch from now on. So I got a little lucky. Although, I made sure I didn't get away with that. Like, you fixing half of it. So then my younger daughter at that time was 5. And my younger daughter goes to Mike and says, what's boycotting? And so Mikey then goes over there, and they're explaining in this little space, and he's like, well, Jazzy, it's like boycotting is when, it's like when you don't give someone your money, or like you don't want to give them your money because they're not cool. And they didn't do something, they just, that was right, and so why do you want to give them your money? I mean, that's a nice 8-year-old explanation. I'm like, right? And then me and Ariana, we're over here on this other end laughing our asses off. We're like, oh, that's the shit to go boycott. Oh, look, he's got a t-shirt. So then my daughter turns at us. How you exemplify? My daughter turns at us, 5. Mom, Dad. And we're like, what's up, mamita? And she says, I need you to start packing my lunch too. Now, in our ways of thinking, I then kind of go on and I say to myself, I'm like, okay, right? Like, I'm not putting one on one together. I'm just like appreciating the moment. I'm like, what's up, baby? Are you gonna boycott the cafeteria too? No, I'm girl-cutting the cafeteria. Thank you.